think we're more or less up to date. I think we might be a lot behind. Today is the 22nd of Shvat.
Tonight's daf is Ches.
Ches. Okay, so we're behind one. Okay. Rava. Oh, no, of course we'll be on Ches tonight. Sure we'll be on Ches tonight. Yeah. Oh, base now. Right, yeah, okay. We're up to date. Okay. So, we're based at the two dots. Umosar Omer, which is almost at the top, but not quite. You see the two dots almost at the top of Omer base? Umosar Omer, the leftover from the Omer. What happens is like this. What happens is that when they harvest for the Korban Omer, so they harvest much more than they need because they sift it 13 times over, so it should be very fine. So what's left over from the Korban Omer at the end, what's left over from the sifting, the shaila is, do you have to take challah off of that when you set it, so when you make a dough out of it or not? So our Mishnah said you do not. Maslisin lo Rabbi Akiva. Our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Akiva. The Akiva chayav b'challah meiser. Rabbi Akiva said the leftover for the korban omer is chayav and challah and meiser. Okay, you have to take off challah from it. You have to take off meiser from it. Basically, the question is whether it has the same status as bona fide hekdesh or not. It was designated to be a korban. It never made it to be a korban. Does it have the same status as a korban, that it's exempt from all the gifts to the Kohanim or not? That is the machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and the rabbis of our Mishnah. Utvush levi shlish. Now, this is a very interesting thing. A grain which has not yet reached the third is exempt from everything, except for trumas, maitros of any sort, except it's not exempt from challah. Rabban and our Mishnah said it's chayav and challah. We didn't put enough emphasis on that. It's machlokas Rabban and Rabbi Eliezer. Rabban hold that a grain which has not yet grown a third is chayav and challah. In other words, if you take it and you make dough out of it, so you have to take challah off of it. So my time with the Rabbanon, what's the Rabbanon say it's chayav? Nemar lechem b'Pesach, it says bread by Pesach. Nemar lechem b'Challah, it says bread by Challah. Ma lechem nemar Pesach, just like the bread which is stated by Pesach. Davar shubali de matzah chametz. It's anything which can come to matzah and chametz. Anything which could be baked, leavened or unleavened. Af lechem shenemar b'Challah, so to bread which is stated by Challah. Davar shubali de matzah v'chametz is something which could be either leavened or unleavened. Now, the thing is, grain, even if it's not a third grown, can be leavened or unleavened. That's the bottom line. My time with Rabbi Lezer, what's the logic of Rabbi Lezer? I saw the logic of Rabbi Lezer is that it's like Rabbi Lezer, who says that if it's less than a third grown, you don't have to take challah off of it when you make a dough out of it. So he holds that the status is like truma, because challah and truma are linked. Ma truma is goyer mi perish shlish, just like truma of the silos from fruit which has grown to a third of its growth. Avzumi perish shlish, so too this is also from fruit which has grown to a third of its growth. Meaning, if it's less than a third of its growth, it's not chayav and challah. Now, so all that is straightforward. Now we're going to get into some little bit of a novelty here. But lately, Rabbi Lezer lechem lechem. Does Rabbi Lezer not hold? When I heard the mailbox, I knew it was you. You mail letters very often before you come in. The Lezer. See, I read a lot of detective novels, so I know these things. Lezer Rabbi Lezer. Does Rabbi Lezer not know? Lechem. Does Rabbi Lezer not? Does he not hold of the drush of lechem? After all, it says lechem here. It says lechem by Pesach, lechem by Challah, and lechem by Pesach, just like by Pesach, anything which could become chametz and matzah. So it's over here, anything which could become chametz and matzah should be chayav in Challah. We're talking about the machlokas in our Mishnah, which had to do with whether grain, which is less than a third grown, is chayav in Challah when you make it into a dough or not. Rabbanan hold it's chayav because they learn out from anything which can become leavened or unleavened from Pesach. Rabbi Lezer holds it's potter because he learns that from Truma. Because the only thing that chayav in Truma, chayav in Challah, and if it's less than a third grown, it can never become chayav in Truma. Now we ask the question, Lezer, Rabbi Lezer, lechem, where are we? Opposite what in the Ritbaz?
Opposite, two lines above where it says the Divrei Maslo Shmuel.
2 lines above where it says Shmuel. Okay. Rabbi Lezer, lechem. Lechem doesn't hold the Gzerah Shava of lechem. Lechem, we learn our bread from Pesach. Ashkachtani b'shem Rabbi Lezer. Now this is amazing. We found there Rabbi Lezer eina chayeves b'chala v'eina adam yitzei b'yidei chavas v'pesach. I know it's not so amazing, but you're not yitzei chiyav of matzah if you eat a matzah which is baked from grain which had grown less than a third of its growth. In other words, you have to eat mature grain in order to be chayev in order to be able to eat matzah. Okay, what about the next question then? Follows, we should ask the following question. Kohen Blezel said, "You're not chayev in challah. You're not yitzei matzah with grain which is less than a third grown. Ma'u shechayav and lechem shlom mishum chodesh. Does chodesh apply to that grain? Right? Is it also to eat until after the korban omer? Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi said yes. I'll tell you why. See, because it says by the parameters of chodesh, the lechem, the koli, the karmelo sochlu. It says bread. And koli is toasted grain, and carmel means raw grain. You should not eat until you bring the korban omer. Well, you could toast any grain. You could toast even grain which is less than a third grown. So, chayovin al koli shalom mishum chodesh. Anytime you're chayiv, even on the toast, because of chodesh. And of course, as I said, you could toast grain even if it's less than a third grown. Chayovin al lechem shalom mishum chodesh. You're chayiv on bread which is made from it because of chodesh as well. So despite the fact that it's really not normal bread, since there's a linkage between koli, anything which can be toasted, and this bread, so therefore it is subject to the normal parameters of chodesh, meaning you can't eat it until after the korban omer. Okay? If there was a type of grain which when toasted you would not have the application of chodesh, then on its bread there would also not be an application of chodesh as well, but that's not our case. Rabbi Zira said, Ksiv says, Aser ta'aser, Shemaiser kol tvaz arecha. Shemaiser all the grain of your seeds. Davar shu nizra umatzmiach. It's something which we could plant and it will grow. Yotza pachas mishlish. This is as opposed to something which is less than a third grown. Meaning, if you replant in the ground, shim nizra umatzmiach, it's not going to grow anything. So Rav Zira is giving the rationale not for our issue of challah, but for why you're exempt from Trumas something which is less than a third grown. Why? Because it is not suitable for replanting, reseeding and replanting.
Where does he learn that from the process? Called to us?
It's called Tvua Zarecha. A Tvua which can become, then again, Zera. Can become a seed, right. Pshita, Ad Rabbanan. Now it's Pashut that according to Rabbanan who hold that if it grew less than a third, that it is it's chayiv challah, but exempt from ma'aser, right? Pshita other Rabbanan pachas mishol l'shlish. If you, let's say, you made a dough which consists of stuff which is normal grain, meaning more than a third grown grain, grain which is more than a third grown, and stuff which is less than a third grown. You mix them all together. So pshita the rabbanim ba'ain pachas mishlub misholosh mishlish sheino nigro l'nei maisos. That which is less than a third is not schlepped along in terms of meiser. It's not schlepped along. In other words, if the major part of the dough is chayim and trumas and meisers, that matter the minor part. I don't know any part. Part of the dough is chayim and trumas and meisers because it's more than a third grown, and the other part is less than a third grown. It doesn't schlepp it together. In other words, you only have to take off trumas and meisers based on a proportion, not based on the stuff which is less than a third grown. That's only a lead up to where we want to ask. Now we're going to ask the question we want to ask. Rabbi Chia bar Yosef Shal, Chia bar Yosef asked, Al daitid Rabbi Lezer. According to Rabbi Lezer, who holds that stuff which is less than a third grown is exempt from challah. Maushi and nigra l'nei challah. If you mix in that stuff which is less than a third grown with stuff which is a third grown, does it schlep it along? How so? Ki isas ores. We have precedent for this. Precedent we learned early in the Masechta. By now we all forgot. I forgot too. That if you have a dough which is made primarily, again I don't know if it's primarily, but it's made a significant extent of wheat. There's also rice as part of it. So you have to take challah from the rice as well. Because although rice does not ferment properly on its own, when it's put into a dough together with grain, so it's considered to ferment properly. So then when you take the challah off, you have to take off the challah not just proportional to the original proper grain which you had,
but proportional also to the additional rice which is there as well. So to here the question is, do we say that which is less than a third grown is dragged in, so to speak, to that which is already a third grown? And of course the Gemara doesn't answer.
You drew a couple of days ago where you had a circle of dough, and then you had little pieces of dough.
Those are all grains.
Those are all different types
of grains, right.
Okay.
This is talking about where you mixed in, not adjacent there to, not juxtaposed, but actually mixed in rice. Okay, and that expands the definition of the dough to include the rice. Okay? Says Gemara, Shmu Barabba boy, Ezu Chodesh v'Yoshin shebechallah. That's an interesting question. There's halach, of course, you can't take truma off from from fiscal year 5758 and fiscal year 5757, right? There's halach that you can't take off truma, meiser from one year and the other.
What about challah? Can you take truma and meiser from challah from one year on the other? Now, there's a more larger question in that, which is what determines the year vis-a-vis challah, right? So that's what Gemara is about to deal with. Shmuel Barabba boy, Ezu Chodesh v'Yoshin Rusha. How do we find Chodesh and Yoshin and Challah? It says I want to tell you. Shtei tzadot. You have two fields. Achas evia shlish. You have one which grew a third before Rosh Hashanah. Say before Rosh Hashanah 5758. B'achas pachas mishlish. One grew less than a third before the beginning of 5758. In other words, grew a seventh in a third in 5758, not in 5757. So, in terms of their halachas, l'chala achas, you take challah from one field on the other field. They're interchangeable in terms of challah. But in terms of meiser, there are two separate fields. Why? Because one goes after last year, the one which was already mature in 5757. One goes after next year, the one which only mature in 5758. Okay? That's okay. That's straight up. The problem is we haven't yet defined challah, right? We just said the challah achas, so we see the parameter challah is not a third. Now, of course, according to Rabbi Lezer, it is, because Rabbi Lezer holds they only become chayim challah once it grows a third. But we're going Rabbanan here. Rabbanan holds it's chayim challah even when it's younger, more immature than the third grown.
What's the phrase with achas?
No, I think you're punctuating wrong. Try again. Shtei sodos. Achas evia shlish, comma, meaning lived before Rosh Hashanah. V'achas pachas mishlish, and one was less than the third grown before Rosh Hashanah. So when does it grow? Third next year.
Right.
So it's l'chala achas. They can still take challah from the growth of one field on the growth of the other field. But the meiser time, in terms of meiser, they're two separate fields. Why? Because Rosh Hashanah is the cutoff date.
They're for meiser.
For meiser.
Obviously not for challah.
Not for challah. Now we're going to talk about for challah. Achas pachas mishlish. Let's say one of them is less than a third grown in 5757. And one of them is even more mature. V'achas hasovim. One of them is still only grass in 5757. Then the challah time. In terms of challah, they're two separate fields. So what do we see? The cutter point is vis-a-vis challah. What do we see? The first glimmerings of grain is what makes it a field vis-a-vis challah. So here, these two fields were both less than a third grown by Rosh Hashanah, but one of them already had glimmerings of grain, and the other did not. So there are two separate years vis-a-vis challah. The one which had the grain already apparent in 5757, it's a 5757 challah. The one which had the grain apparent only in 5758, it's a 5758 challah. But for meiser, they're both 5758 fields. Why? Because neither of them was a third grown when it came to Rosh Hashanah. Okay? So, Again, l'chala shtayim. It's l'chala, the 2 fields. L'maiser, in terms of maiser, achas, it's 1 field. Achas ivia shlish, v'achas hasol sovim. What if you have 2 fields? One already was the 3rd grown before Rosh Hashanah, and one was still in the grass stage before Rosh Hashanah. Bein l'chala, bein l'maiser shtayim. So both in terms of chala, in terms of maiser, they're 2 separate fields. Why? Because the chala, one is still grass. It's certainly next year's field. In terms of maiser also, since it's grass, it's less than a 3rd grown, and therefore it's certainly susceptible to next year as well. Okay? End of the issue. New issue. Ben asai mao. Between, what is its status of between? What do you mean by that? In the previous mission we talked about stuff which is chayiv and challah and exempt from meiser. In the next mission we're going to talk about stuff which is exempt both from challah and meiser. Somewhere in the next mission. No, wait. The exact opposite. In the first mission, we're talking about those things that are chayim and challah and exempt from meiser. In the next mission, we're talking about those things which are exempt from challah and chayim and meiser.
Yeah, those are the 2 differences.
What about the things in between? Ben asai means the stuff in between. What about an in-between case? And more we'll define what in-between case is in a minute. Rabbi Yoina b'shem Rishon Midlogis said ben asai and karishona. The cases which fall in the middle, they're like the first mission. They're exempt from meiser and chayiv and challah. Rabbi Yoina b'shem Rishon Midlogis said ben asai. The middle cases are like the last cases. They're chayiv and meiser and potter from challah. Okay, tell me a case. Eza ben asayim, what's a middle case? Hosa isa minat tevel. This is a very interesting case. You make a dough from tevel, non-ticed, completely unticed, pristine. It comes before you. Hosa isa minat tevel. Chala chayeves b'truma. So the truth is, this should have been a question, but now we're already giving the answer. It's chala is chayev in truma, and it's truma is chayeves in chala. In other words, they're not mutually exclusive. The chala has to be taken up proportionally in that which is truma, and the truma has to be taken up proportionally in that which is chala as well. Okay, you can't say, well, each one is not subject to any proportions because it's distinct. You have to take off on each one of them. Okay?
And what if you gave the challah what if you gave the truma to the Kohen already?
Take off challah corresponding to that truma he gave the Kohen. That's his responsibility. Otherwise, the Kohen is coming out eating tevel. Okay? Minayin shel challah chayeves v'truma. How we know that the challah must be tight with truma? Rabbi Yitzchak b'shem Rabbi Shmuel bar Marta b'shem Rav said, because it says challah tarimu truma. It says challah, you should take truma, from which we darshan, we understand the mean. Me challah tarimu truma. From challah, you still have to take 12 truma. And vice versa, minayin shel truma chayeves challah. How we know that the truma is liable to challah? Mean kusuvi, from the rabbis from Kusuvi, the Kusavitskis. The rabbis from Kusuvi. What did they say? Kosovo was actually a region in Macedonia. Patri no den kaya. They're out from this pasuk. Because it says Reshis Tarimu Chala. It's actually a contraction of the pasuk. The pasuk says Reshis Hariso Sechem, the first of your dough, Chala Tarimu Truma. So we darshan that truma is chayim and challah because we're saying the reshis, that which is already truma, the first tithe, from that you should take off challah. So we see that the challah is chayim and truma, and the truma is chayim and challah. Okay? Says more further. Has-sufganin. Now sufganin in Hebrew means jelly donuts. Same thing. Sufganin, sufganiyot. This is the plural in Aramaic. So, but here it's actually a kind of sponge cake. I don't think it's a jelly dough. It's kind of sponge cake. So the sufganim is trikta. That's what it's called in Aramaic, or another kind of dialect. What? Well, we're going to talk about that. But the consistency of the dough is different. Actually, it's a different consistency dough in the bread. It's sponge-like, which I assume means it's like sponge cake. Okay? Asuv kanim, that's trikta. Haduv shonim, honey donuts, those are maligala. That's what they're called. Iskratin, that's a very loose dough.
We have something like this.
The brachos in Bavli. Yeah, in Ketzim and Varchim, all the different brachos on these things. Iskratin are chalit in the shuk. These are like bagels things. They're made by coming into contact with very hot water, and they are sold in the marketplace. The chalas misras, that's the same idea, but it's chalit in the maya. It's done in water as opposed to first 100 guests are done in oil. Rabbi Yochanan trikta cheves b'challah. The sponge-like bread is chayim and challah. It's the zuger. It's chayim and challah. We want us to wait to get a cup of coffee? Are you still off coffee?
I'm not.
What?
My coffee.
You're back on coffee again? Good to hear it. Okay. I have to get your phone to ring.
What?
I see you have a phone. We'll have to get it to ring. So chalas misvas is chalit in the maya. It's whatever that's called, scalded in hot water. Rabbi Yochanan trikta cheves and challah. Trikta is chayim and challah. Vaymer alot, and you make on it hamoitzi lechem minoretz. So the sponge-like bread is challah and it's chayim and hamoitzi. But the yotzi b'dei chavos Pesach, you can be yotzi chiv on Pesach. Interesting thing again. I don't know how you make it because obviously it's just bread and flour. But somehow you get the dough to have a sponge-like consistency. Sponge cake is made with eggs.
That's true.
You don't make a motzi.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay. I don't. Okay, but Rabbi Shimon Lakish Omer chikta enechavis b'challah because it's not bread. Ve'omer lo mitzvah menorah because it's not bread. Ve'omer mitzvah b'dei chavos pesach because it's not bread. Rabbi Yossi Mar Tartar. Rabbi Yossi brought down this machlokus. He brought down another machlokus. Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish. The first machlokus, the one we just saw. Rabbi Yochanan Mar trikta cheres challah. The sponge-like stuff is chayim and challah. V'omer lo mitzvah lechem menorah. Anyway, can we make it a moitzi, v'adam bo yotzi b'dei chavos Pesach, and the person is yotzi chiv on Pesach. Rabbi Shimon Lakish Amar trikta eino chayeves b'challah. It's not chayim b'challah. Ve'ino emer lo v'amitzach menorah, so don't make a motzi on it. Ve'ino lo yotzi b'dei chavos b'Pesach, person not yotzi chiv on Pesach. That machlokus we already saw. Rabbi Yossi Amar Chorei. Rabbi Yossi then added on another machlokus. Now this is a very interesting machlokus. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, kosher or mahalik mitachtav, anything you bake, or fry, or cook, where the heat source is underneath whatever's being cooked, is chayav mechala. Really, a heat source underneath. Now that's not the only case, because in the old days, how did they bake bread? From the side. So avad, if it's on the side, it's chayav. But even if it's below, it's still chayiv. Okay.
Well, the heat source was not on the side. The heat source was below. They just stuck the collar on the side.
Yeah, but the flames are in the middle. That's called minatzat. The Gemara is going to be clarify that.
So it excludes anything that's being broiled, where the heat source is on top.
Right. Excludes anything being broiled. Rabbi Shim v'yoyt. I don't know where I'm up to. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Omar, however, he said, kosher mach mitachtav eino chayachay b'chal. Anything where the fire is underneath is not chay b'chal. Because where do you need the fire to be? On the side. He daf gold, you need it on the side. Vein omrim v'lo mitzlach menorah can make a motzei vein of yetzu decholos of Pesach. Normally, Rabbi Yochanan said one respect I concede to you. It's a very basic respect. Ubilvad, as long as it's not Aidei Mashke. Where I said the fire's underneath, I didn't mean the fire's underneath a pot full of water in which the dough is cooking. Not cooking dough, baking. I meant even if you bake with the fire below, that's still bread. But after bake, you can't cook. Okay? So, no liquids. Masisa pliga Rabbi Yochanan. The following Mishnah seems to argue Rabbi Yochanan. The Mishnah says, our Mishnah actually, has to have gone in the sponge-like stuff, badushanim, stuff which is full of honey, vaiskaritin, I forgot what that is. Oh, the stuff which is scalded in the hot water. The chalas Mishnah is the stuff which is fried in the pan. Vameduma, and where truma got mixed in with the batch, all p'tur min challah. It's all pater from challah. It's not like Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan sufgan in chayiv in challah. So pater la Rabbi Yochanan will explain our Mishnah. The sufganin by sufganim shenasu, and there's a typo here. It should be bechama. It's talking about sponge cake which is made in the sun. That's not bread. Anything made in the sun is not bread, even if it gets very hot and baked properly. It's not like it should be bread.
The heat source is from above.
It's on top, right. That's right. I was going to say that. I forgot. Right.
I put it on top of the pan on top of the sand.
It still would be no good because I assume the sand is heated up by the sun.
Of course it gets heated up by the sun. But when it says nasa ba'or, or nasa b'chama, does that mean that it has to be directly the sun beating down on, or it can't
be a fire source?
It can't be the reflection of the sun's light. So
that's not going to be true.
What about a dud shemesh that heats up?
Well, I told you once, the Shmir, not in this daf yomi, the morning daf yomi. Shmir Shabbos Suchos in the first edition was matir a dud shemesh on Shabbos. Where are you going to get it? Yeah, okay, we'll wait till you get back. Here, bring back to that's right. Shmir Shabbos Suchos said in his first edition that a dud shemesh is mutzah to use on Shabbos. Because the truth is, it's not even toldos chama. Chazal asked with anything where you heat up a vessel, and the vessel heats up then a foodstuff. But here it's the sun itself heating up the water. Then in the second edition, he asked for it because there are those who hold that the heating of the pipes. It's true you're not heating up first the receptacle and then heating up the water, but the sun does hit, contraption on the roof, which is what heats up the water. So he made it, so in the second edition he treated that as toldos chama. So I don't know if was that what you were about to ask me about a dud shemesh?
Well, he's talking about heating up the sun heating up the sand.
Yeah.
So it's something like
Right, I would say it's part of from challah. No, it's my point. If the sun beat down on the sand, then the sand cooked the.
because it's indirect.
It's in there, but that's only difference by Shabbos, not by challah. By challah, anytime the heat source is the sun, it seems like it's not going to be considered to be chayiv and challah. Okay, but Shabbos can make a difference whether it's chama or toldos chama, but not by. I don't think by challah. I mean, you said before that it's because the fire is not going underneath it, so that was somewhat glib, right? Because not because it's incorrect, but because it's not completely all-encompassing. Because in your case, even though the heat source is underneath, since it comes from the sun, it's not going to be chayiv and challah. Okay, that's my impression. No cups. Oh, are there cups though? Okay. Okay. Says more further. Now here it says again, there's a typo. It should be apostle of sufkan shenasu ba'ur. They made in the fire, and it should. That's what it says here. It should say sufkan shenasu b'chama. They're made in the sun. Now the next word should be Titania. We learned to the Brisa. We don't have Titania, and then it should be instead of ve'ain, it should be ain. The Titania ain yotze b'sufkan shenasu b'chama. You can't be yotze matzah with sufkanim which are made in the sun. Yotze b'sufkan shenasu b'ur. You can be yotze with sufkanim which are made in the fire. V'leisa dapli Yerushalmi Lakish. Ask the Gemara anyway. This is arguing Rish Lakish because Rish Lakish holds got to be fire on the bottom side. Here's fires on the bottom. It seems right. That's how you make sufkanim. So, but to look, so you know what? He's talking about the truth is he's talking about a case where the ur is going. He says any sufkanim which are okay for Pesach, it must be that the fire initially went on the side and not underneath. Okay. Milayim Rabbanan Pligin. The words of the rabbis, which we're going to learn, argue. Now, what in the world do they argue on? Nothing to do with Masechta Challah, mind you. They argue in Gemara, Mishnah Masechta Trumos. In Masechta Trumos, it says there that, well, actually, it's not a Mishnah; it's a discussion there in the Gemara. Masechta Trumos, it says if you have one fig of truma, which got mixed in with 100 figs of chulin, of course, the one fig is bato, right? That's the halacha of truma being bato bro, 1 in 100. What happens, however, if the one fig was white and all the other figs are brown and it got pressed in? So it's machlokas there, whether I say nonetheless bittul barov, that it's canceled. I say it's so different, it's not batal barov. And the Gemara comes to the conclusion that it is batal barov, even though it's different. The Gemara says that's only true, however, if you have at least 2 other figs the same color. Because then either rice it's batal barov, 2 against 1. Rabbanan said until you get 100 against 1, it should be machmir. But you need the initial answer of 2 against 1. Here the Gemara is saying perhaps that's not true. Milei the Rabbanan Pligin means perhaps our rabbis argue and hold that even if you only have 1 white fig which is osir and 99 black figs which are mutter, those black figs are mevatel the white fig, even though they're dissimilar. Now, what would the rationale be for that bittul if they're dissimilar? Only similar is mevatel similar. Not dissimilar being vato similar. So what would the rationale be here for it to work? So the rationale the Gemara is going to say is that Truma Zman is as Drabbana. So since the whole thing is Drabbana, so it's like Hey Mamru Vei Mamru. They said it should be also. They said how it's going to work to be matir it. Okay, so far so good. So says Gemara again. Milayin the Rabbanan Pligin. The words of the rabbis will argue that Mishnah in Trumos. Kahana shal l'Shmuel. Kahana asked Shmuel. Lo mistabra ve'im meduma. Now this gets back to our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said that meduma, where you have stuff mixed in, challah mixed in with stuff, and you're not sure if there's enough to be challah mixed in with suffix truma in a pot. Now, what does it mean it's suffix truma? You're not sure if there's enough other stuff to cancel the truma, right? So, lo mistabra behein meduma. So, I forgot what he's saying. What? Okay. It's the watch, maybe.
So he has a chalik, but he lost
let me start it again. Lo mistaber b'ain meduma. In our mission said meduma is exempt from challah. Said meduma is exempt from challah. What meduma are we talking about? It makes sense that Tzniya Nacha, that the meduma mentioned in Mishnah is one she'ruba truma, where the majority of it is truma. Why is that? Because logic would dictate where would be a case where meduma would exempt you from challah if the truma was the majority, so it's mevatel. the permissible stuff, the chulin berov. So now the whole thing has status of truma. So the whole thing has status of truma. Truma is not chayiv and challah. So he says our Mishnah, which exempts meduma from truma, must be talking about a case where the majority of the mixture is truma, and then I say the miut is bata barov, and therefore no chiyuv challah. So he takes out the next word, the second time it says truma. Amar lei Shmuel said, "Of on a sabra came." I also hold the same way. Ella, nonetheless, when you go up to the Holy Land, at Shalom, ask them the question. When he came with Eretz Yisrael, Rav Kach came with Eretz Yisrael, Shava Rabbi Yasser b'shem Rabbi Yochanan didn't even have to ask. You heard Rabbi Yasser say the name Rabbi Yochanan. Afilu sa achash shenofla al tisha v'teisha chulin. Even if you got one measly measure of truma on your meduma, the whole thing is exempt from challah. The whole thing. The one measure of truma exempts the whole mixture from challah. Rabbi Avo said, instead of kach, it should be kach. Kach meishiv Rabbi Shimon Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. This is Rabbi Shimon Lakish used to ask Rabbi Yochanan. He asked him, I'm sorry, Haseyot Poter says Hakol. Does the one measure exempt you altogether? How could that possibly be? Rabbi Yochanan answered him. He said, listen, you got a case like this. By truma, you have a whole bunch of round cakes, of figs, right, which fall together. So you have here one large roll of cake, one large roll of date cake, which fell into many small rolls of date cake. So you know which one is the big one. Is it batel? Yes, nonetheless it's batel. Why? Oh, wait a minute. Okay, yeah, the case is not that outlandish. It's a tad less outlandish. You have a case like that. You have a large cake which fell into a batch of small and large cakes. Okay, so you take the large cake out, and you take one of the large cakes out, I don't know which one, obviously, and you give it to a Kohen as Truma. Well, you've had that. Mikra, you don't have to do that, because it's Bata Barov. We had, because of Gezel HaShevet, you take one out and you give it to the Kohen. So it says, how do you know you picked the one which was Truma and gave it to the Kohen? Obviously you don't. So how are you mevatel it? We're talking about a case where there are many big ones, there are several big ones and several small ones. Yet you use both the big and the small to be mevatel the big. You should just reject all the small. They shouldn't come into the cheshbon at all. Why? Because they're definitely not the ones, so there's no suffix on them. Nonetheless, v'atamarta, what are you going to say about that? Dover kalu. We're making on it. Why? Because Truma Bismana says the Rabbanon. So too here. If I have one measure of Truma in this meduma, in this admixture, what do I say? Ultimately, though, Challah is what Bismana said? The Rabbanon. Kalhu, it's a lighter case, meaning that, despite the fact that we don't have majority of Truma, only minority of Truma, we exempt you from Chal in that case. Now, we okay? Now, why did Rabbi Yochanan answer him? Shani Habi Gulin Shekfar Botlu. Why did Rabbi Yochanan say we're talking about? It's different. It's talking about a case where midaraisa, the large pressed date cake, is butter on at least 2 pressed date cakes. Why didn't he answer him that? Let Reish Lakish said to Rabbi Yochanan, not that the whole katzah to Truma Bismana says the Rabbanon, but rather what? This is a case where even if the Truma is daraisa, it's butter below midaraisa. Because you have 1 and 2. Why didn't Rabbi Yochanan answer that? You know why, says the Gemara? Well, the Gemara doesn't say why, but the Gemara is implying, you know why? It must be that Rabbi Yochanan holds that even in the case where you have one fig of truma which is white, which fell into 99 figs of truma which is black, it's mevatel it. And that's why, since in that case he doesn't hold that in order to be mevatel the one white fig, you have to have at least two other white figs to say bitul b'rov midoraisa. It must be that even if you don't have that case, even if you have no similar figs, since truma bismana says the Rabbana, they were makel anyway, and they said the one fig is both batel, even if it's white in many black figs, or vice versa. The same thing here. That's why he didn't answer Rish Lakish and say, here the one pressed cake, the large one, is batel two other large pressed cakes, because he holds you don't even need two other large pressed cakes. Since Truma's man says the Rabbana would be batel anyway. Again, the Sivnei Shrani all be equal in Shukvar Batlu. Why is the answer that's different where in the press cakes where they're batel? So the answer is he doesn't hold that principle. Rabbi Yonah, Rabbi Yosef Tarvai, Rabbi Yonah, Rabbi Yosef Tarvai, Mishem Rabbi Zira. They both named Rabbi Zira said, Afilu chitin b'chitin toichenu matir. Not only is this true where you have one white fig and many black figs pressed together, because I might say the pressing together is what's matir them, because now they all became one happy mixture or one unhappy mixture, as the case may be. But not just in that case, but even if you have two types of grain, one white and one red, one is truma, one is not. Toichenu matir, you're allowed to grind them together and permit the one which is white by mixing it together. Okay?
It's a terribly stupid question. It's been bothering me so long.
Not terribly. Oh, no terribly stupid questions. Only two stupid
Where
ones.
is this whole concept of Yehuda holding min b'mino as
Yeah.
a never batel? How does that fit into all this?
Not at all.
That's what I feel.
Yeah. That's the rices. It's all the rabbanans. Yeah. We're at the rice, so you'd be right. We're talking about all the rabbanans. Truma's man is as the rabbanan. Well, so therefore we don't have to worry about Rabbi Yehuda. But you're right. We're at the rice. Of course you should make those rabbanans. Okay. They're called Rabbi Yehuda.
All right.
Okay? Finally, one of the last commodities mentioned is being exempt, if not the last commodity. No. Oh, by the Rabbanan does your min b'minos batel?
Yeah.
I think. I honestly don't remember, but I think he does. I think that the Chumrah of Mashu is only by the Rises. I might be totally wrong, but I think it's only by the Rises. Says the Gemara, one of the last cases of mission which is exempt is when you have less than a shiur. Less than 5 fourths. If you exactly 5 fourths, lo b'dor, that's not the case of mission. Talk about that case, you're chayiv and challah. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Boom Sher Rabuna said, lo l'adoi samarton. This is not what not concerning this issue did Rabbi make a statement. Rabbi Yavuna make a statement, but rather a more complex issue. In the following case, Rabbi Yavuna said, meduma poter mina challah. From meduma, as we just saw, you don't take challah. Safik meduma. What if you have a safik meduma? This is a case which we had back in Masech the Trumas, I think. You have 2 cups. Truma fell to one of them. You don't know which one. This one has truma. This one has chulin. Truma fell to one. You don't know which one. So we assume it went into the truma one. That's what's called tolin, right? We assume it went into the truma one. Now again, this again. So truma's man says the rabbanan. So therefore we assume it went to the truma one. The other one's mutter. Nonetheless, not completely. Says more very interesting chiddush. Savi meduma vanecha mishum dimua. That was the one which you eat now. You assume chay b'challah, you have to give challah on it. When is it true? Ever Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Boom Shem, Rabbi Yavuna said, "Hadid Mark Shayusham Yoser Shayu Yoser Michamesh Zavoim." That's only if there are more than 5 fourths in here. They're exactly 5/4 in here. It's exempt from challah, meaning. Although I assume the truma went into here, it's possible the truma went into here, into my chulin. And therefore, in order for the chulin to be chayim and challah, there has to be enough in the chulin to be above and beyond 5/4, and the volume of whatever truma fell in. Because the volume of whatever truma fell in does not add to the shiur, not legitimately add to the shiur, which is chayim and challah. So chayim and challah, in this case, I have to have a little bit more than 5/4, meaning to take into account that were the truma to actually have fallen in here as opposed to in here, that would not impede on having the proper shiur in order to be chayim and challah.
Why does it have to be more than 5/4?
Because because if there was exactly 5/4 here, and the truma might have fallen in here. Midrabanan, I assume it fell in here, but it might have fallen there. So I would have less than 5/4, less than the proper shiur for challah. Because the truma is not mitzdaref for challah. So that's why I need somewhat more than 5/4 to compensate for maybe the truma is what fell in here. Okay? Halacha down. Isa shetchilas sufganim. Dough which started out being sponge-like. The sofa's going ends up being sponge-like. Tchilas isa starts out being dough-like, meaning it's thicker consistency. The sofa's going ends up being sponge-like, or vice versa. Tchilas going starts out being sponge-like. The sofa isa and then it ends up being dough-like. Chayav b'chala chayav in chala. The chayna knuvkos. Now knuvkos are like matzah balls, only they're matzah balls which they used to bring together. They used to bring it together not permanently. It was possible then to grind it up again. Our matzah balls, once you cook them together, they remain matzah balls. Those are stuff which you somehow glued together and was able to take apart again. So chayav and challah. They're like bread. Me'isa is stuff where you put the dough in hot water. So in that case, b'shamay protein. B'shamay says your example from challah. B'sil says your chayim challah. Chalita is the exact opposite. You don't put the dough in the water. You pour the water over the dough. B'shamay says your chayim challah. B'sil says you're exempt. Chalos toida, the chalos brought by it together with the korban toda. For kiki nazir, the flatbreads brought with the korban of a nazir. Asal natzal potter, if you made them for yourself because you are chayis korbanos, so then you're potter from challah because they have a din of hektish. Limkor v'shuki, you made them to sell in the marketplace, so you made them to sell in the marketplace. Right now they don't even have a din of hektish unless you meet somebody to sell it. So therefore they're chayiv and challah.
You're putting the challah dough in the water. Isn't that cooking it in the water? And you said before that it's not chayiv and challah?
True. It had to be a case where it started off being dough. It only didn't end off being dough, but it started off being dough. Okay.
Also, when we make egg challah, that's more spongy than regular water challah.
Yes.
So what would be what would be
that's a good question. Maybe Sfardi Taka wouldn't take off challah from egg challah. I don't know. See, I'm afraid to belie my amaratzus. But do we take challah off cake? Off cake batter? Are you sure? No matter what the size? I'm not talking about Doug and Heinz mix. It's not the right size.
What do you mean the right size? You mean like a baker?
Over 2 pounds. It's before between a fifth to 3/5 kibetz. Yeah.
I'll ask the baker tomorrow.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not sure if we take off challah or not. My impression is that we do. So I assume that we take off all cake type stuff. Okay, that's my impression. Okay? I know that there's a famous famous Reb Chaim. Reb Chaim says no, then you're required to take challah off in Chutz La'aretz. It's like optional. It's like it's a gift. Okay. Starts going further. So it says on further. Chada Isa. Shalal Rabbi Mona. A certain woman asked Rabbi Mona. Begin dana bayla mebat atzvasi. I want to make these sufa, these sponge-like contraptions. Atzvasei atre. Downstairs. Yeah, when they're finished, that's when we start. Begin dana bayla mebat atzvasei atre. I want to make these sponge-like things. Maudi yansavana. Can I take a little bit of my regular dough? We'll tape to him in a challah and make that part from the challah. Okay? Can I take again a little bit of my regular dough, exempt myself from challah, and make it into the sponge cake? Amala, Setter, why not? Thing is, Asa Shai. Then Raimana went to ask his father, who was Rabbi Yaina. Can I do it? Amalei also said, no, you can't. Shemati Malik because maybe she's going to put it back. If she puts it back, it becomes part and parcel of the regular dough again. It comes chayiv and challah. Now the thing is once, therefore, from this we derive, once it was a regular dough, we can't play tricks and try and split off a little bit, because then you'll get mixed up and confused. Put it back, and it won't take off challah off it then. So the whole thing is a mess. Bottom line is, once it potentially is regular dough, you have to take off challah from it. And so too, haknuv kos chayavos. Getting back to our mission, said this is something where you made a comprised from a whole bunch of you comprised a dough from. I said it's like matzah balls, but it's really like you took bread and you ground it up, you crumbled it up, and then you pressed it back together again. So that dough, which is made from the pressed bread, it's kind of like remaking bread from matzah meal or from breadcrumbs. So that dough is chayiv and challah. Don't think, even though you can actually take it later on and break it apart again. Tape to him in a challah. Right now it's exempt from challah, since now it became a foodstuff, so therefore it's chayiv in challah. A foodstuff made out of bread. Amar Rabbi Bar Zavda. So even though again it's made up, it's really hard for me to picture this, but you made matzah meal. You never really made bread. You made matzah meal, then you stuck the matzah meal together. It looks like bread, right? So now you should be chayiv in challah. But it says more, well, maybe not. Maybe since you can make a crumbs against her, exempt from challah, right? Because it's not kederech achilos pas. It's not like normal bread. So Gemara says no. Since it has, you do have to take. The Mishnah said already that you have to take challah off of that. Amar Rabbi Bar Zavda. Rabbi Bar Zavda said, it should be isas marvin. The dough which is used to make pancakes. This is something which we just had in our novice shiur the other day, that Tamar made for Amnon levivot, and it was called she was mavre her. She was mavre. It's called a bria. That was the name of that meal. So these are pancakes. So they're chayiv and challah. Now this is a plia because it's pancakes. It's not bread, right? So it says, nevertheless, this is a gzeira. Don't think because you're going to put it back afterwards to be dough in order to fry it, so it's exempt from challah. It's chayiv. So I guess what was made like this wasn't stomp pancake. It wasn't pancakes made directly from the batter. What happened was you would bake it, make it into bread, then grind it up again, and then fry it. So although it's like the process of French toast, although not really the same thing, matzah brei. Right, so I might say matzah brei is potter from challah because it wasn't bread, kamash mulan that it is bread, and therefore it's chayiv and challah. Okay? Similarly,
Rav Amar Isas Kuto Chayeves B'Challah. The bread which you're going to crumble into your sour milk is Chayev N'Challah. Now, l'chora, why not? Well, l'chora, why yes? It's not real bread. Rabun Shemati Malach Lasos Chara Levan, again, because you might make it into a loaf of bread. You might leave it as a loaf of bread. Ramana said, we have to there pronounce avidan avitzim, that those who are make avitzim, which is a milchik type of bread, and they make less than a shiur. They make less than a shiur at a time. The dion avdin lampachs mikashir avitzin dion, and avdin lampachs mikashir, they make less than a shiur at a time. Because they think that way they're going to pater it up. Shichayeves. They were afraid maybe they'll make the whole shiur at one time, and therefore we have to tell them they don't. No matter what, they have to take chal off of it. All right, so these are really examples to Rabbanon as to when you have to take a chal no matter what, even though you think it's exempt. The Bavli does add. It says that the Bavli adds in brachos. It says that all this is only where the bread is baked, where the bread is made in the sun, like we said before, which they a lot of times just make kutuch bread in the sun because they didn't bother baking, because anyway they're going to crumble in the sour milk. Then it's still chayev, it's still exempt from challah. That's be dafka bake. Yeah, but it's not flour. It means that it's going to be like matzah meal again. You baked it, and then you're going to crumble it up and start over again. It's not going back to full, to nothing, I assume.